Hello and welcome back to my channel, Fictional Latitude. I'm Deborah and it's time for our, I shouldn't have done that, poor. It's time for the roundup of May's reading, which started off really well and ended on a bit of a bummer. But there we go, can't have it all, can we? Now it turns out that I had lots of historical fiction in May, very weird. We had, well, not weird, I suppose. You kind of go with into a sort of a, I don't know. I can't think. I was about to say a genre ditch. That's not what I meant. I was thinking more along the lines of you decide you want to read something of this ilk, and then you carry on in that vein. Anyway, so we have Robert Harris's Pompeii, Tracy Chevalier at the Edge of the Orchard, Lynne Truss, Tennyson's Gift, Victoria Hislop's The Return, and The Cuckoo in the Nest, Evelyn Waugh's Scoop. So let us start. Okay, let's just give you a quick, no, let's not give a quick overview. What am I talking about? No, let's just go straight in. Pompeii. Easy to read, very good, zipped through it. I've got to stop waving my left hand around. Zipped through it, enjoyed it. The good thing about Robert Harris is he does his research. So you know, I'm going to move back a bit because I feel like all you've got is my face in the thing. So Robert Harris knows how to write historical fiction. He does his research really well. He writes so that you move along at a good pace. You don't get bogged down in, there's information in here, there's technical information that's important to the story, not just stuck in there for the sheer hell of it. And it had a little bit of a love story in there. And what I really liked is that it took information from Pompeii, such as political graffiti that's on the walls, all of the information about the Aqua Augusta, the water. Oh my gosh, I've gone completely blank today with words. I think it's because I've got too much pain elsewhere. The aqueduct that delivered water all around the Bay of Naples. And that's where the focus is. So the protagonist is the Aquarius, who is in charge of the aqueduct and supplying the water to the Roman towns around the Bay of Naples. So that's Pompeii, Herculaneum, Mycenaeum, etc., etc. He's only been there a couple of days and it's all gone tits up. They've run out of water. The water stops in certain places. There's sulphur in it. So the last place that hasn't stopped so that they can find out is Pompeii. So off they head to Pompeii. And this is all told within the 4 days, 2 days before and the 2 days of the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD, which, if you probably are aware, completely obliterated Pompeii, Herculaneum and a couple of the other smaller ones around the bay, and also saw off Pliny the Elder along with a few other notables, but he was the biggest notable. I'm going to put this down because I can't swap hands. But as I say, very well written. I really enjoyed it. The story cracks along nicely and perfectly in line with all of... I mean, this was written quite a few years ago, actually. When was it written? Got the wrong glasses on to actually see properly, of course. Typical. 2003. So 21 years ago. And they have made loads and loads more discoveries in Pompeii since then about how things worked, etc., etc. And what I found really interesting, because I also have an Italian news site in English, and whilst I do write about the politics and the general what happenings in the world, Italian world, I'm actually more interested in the history and culture and what have you. So there has been a lot of stuff found recently about how Pompeii was still being rebuilt after the earthquake a few years before, and that is in here, so it's referred to in here. And that's what I like, is the fact that I know that all these things are still being discovered. We're finding out more and more about it now, but Robert Harris already had it in there. So if you like historical fiction where you're not bogged down by facts, but the facts are interwoven into the story and you know they're accurate, he's the man to do it. So, as I say, really nice book. Next on the list is Tracy Chevalier's At the Edge of the Orchard. Just going to have, my sister always, I hate when people slurp their tea and coffee on the thing, but I'm about to, though it is hot. I'm steaming up my glasses. I've been treating myself today to good teas. A little tangent here. When you're in Spain, there is a lack of good tea. Though I have in my kitchen teas back from that I bought in England, usually at Fortnum's. The one I had this morning was from the County Hall Library, which is really nice. When we had afternoon tea there and a heck of a lot of of English champagne, sparkling wine. Anyway, so I had that this morning, and now I'm having a Countess Grey. Oh, lovely, lovely. So I'm treating myself today. Oh my goodness, do you know, that's just reminded me of a really poor joke. So I will carry on with my... You're not here for the humour, I know, but I just been mixing my teas. Reminds me of the thing about the rabbit. The rabbit who went in and ordered, went into the cafe and said, "Can I have a cheese and ham toastie?" So gets given the cheese and ham toastie, he eats the toastie, that was lovely. "Can I now have a ham and tomato toastie?" So he gets delivered a ham and tomato toastie, eats all that. Then he asks for another toastie, and he eats that. And then he starts rolling on the floor, clutching his stomach. And they said, "What's wrong, rabbit?" He says, "I think I'm dying. Why? From mixing with toasties." I just ballsed it up, didn't I? That's a good thing you're not here for the humour. I might edit that out. Anyway, Tracy Chevalier, At the Edge of the Orchard. Now, was it last month or the month before? Or even the month before that, I read Elif Shafak's The Island of Missing Trees. And this kind of gives me that feeling as well, though it is different, in that it's all about, the trees are an integral part, and it's all about your roots, and trees really, and nature really bring you into that inescapable link that we have with the natural world, even though as humans we are generally screwing it up. So At the Edge of the Orchard is based in 1838, and it starts in the Black Swamp in Ohio, and we have Sadie and James who have their orchard, and they grow a mixture of spitters, which are used to make cider, or applejack, which is the really, I think is an absinthe equivalent of cider, and eaters, which are the sweeter ones. And he grows golden pippin, which apparently came from either his grandfather or his great-grandfather from England. And they grow them. Anyway, it starts off with that part, and they had 10 children, but 5 of them have died from swamp fever. Every year the swamp fever comes, and it usually takes one of the children away. But they all suffer except for Robert, one of the children. He never seems to get it. Oh no, it wasn't Robert, was it? It was the daughter. Anyway. They are, James and Sadie, detestable characters. They're horrible. They are so horrible. I really didn't want to. She's a drunken slut, and he is far more interested in worrying about his blinking apple trees than he is about his children, about his wife, about anything else. All about the tree, all about the apples. And he wants to grow more eaters, and because she's a drunk, she wants them to grow more spitters, which quite frankly they're horrible, horrible name for them. And that's the first part of it. And then it becomes epistolary as well. So we get letters coming back from Robert, who is their son, who goes off, and we get all these letters from him coming back, usually written on New Year's Day every year, to say, I'm now here. I'm in the gold rush in California. I'm following this, I'm following that. And we don't really... Then it goes to Robert, and we don't really know we do. It all ties up at the end, but obviously I'm not going to spoil it for you. But what it is that they are tied back. It all comes back. Now, the historical figure that's in this one, Pliny the Elder, was a recognisable historical figure in Pompeii, and in this one it's William Lobb. William Lobb and his brother were real Victorian plant collectors who used to go around the world collecting trees or interesting plants and having them shipped back to England, where the wealthy were creating their beautiful gardens with foreign plants. And Robert ends up meeting William Lobb and around the sequoia, now I'm not sure if I've said that right, it's too many vowels in a row, trees, the really, really big ones, bigger than the redwood trees. You know, you could put 20 men put their arms around it. It's that big, a tree. So that is the basis of this story, and it is really nicely written, but at the same time, because Tracy Chevalier wrote The Girl with the Pearl Earring, but at the same time you don't, even Robert, I didn't really feel that I didn't care for him. I didn't dislike him at all, but I really wasn't that bothered about what happened to him. Not at all. But I was glad that I didn't have to read too much more about his parents, because they were annoying the heck out of me. But I like the way it brings in all of these historical events together seamlessly. That's an AI word, if ever there was one, isn't it? Seamlessly. It brings it all together neatly into a well-told story that you, once again, can go through at a nice pace, enjoy, and you do think, yes, go on then. But really, the people at the bit, I'd say this is a 4-star read, as was Pompeii. But trees, that is what really, it was the trees that I was more invested in than the people. But that might be because I'm a cold-hearted woman, maybe. The third book, and probably my favourite out of the whole of May's reading, is Tennyson's Gift by Lynne Truss. Now this isn't old, but this has been sat in my to-be-read pile for years. And I'm very glad that I actually did move everything so that it's now sat in that one bookcase in my bedroom, so that as soon as a book is finished, I can crawl out of my bed, grab a new book, crawl back in and start. Not that I spend my whole life in my bed, but you know what I mean. That's where a lot of my reading gets done. This is lightly comic. When you read that on the back, a comic novel of subtle distinction, richly entertaining and at times very moving, said the Times, I think, but actually I was chuckling a lot of the way through it. And this book is full of historical figures. It has, and I checked this because, well, there is an author's note at the back as well, but I did check it. I thought, did they all really go to the Isle of Wight? What a setting, eh? Did they all really go to the Isle of Wight? Were they all close? Did they know each other? Yes, all of these people did. So we have Tennyson, poet laureate, and his family. We have Charles Dodgson, aka Lewis Carroll, and there are loads and loads of references to Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass at the beginning of it. Well, all the way through actually, but having just reread those last month, I was like, oh, I know where that bit is. It was very, very, as soon as they said a couple of words, I thought, yeah, I know where we're referring to there. Then there was Julia Margaret Cameron? Yeah, or Cameron anyway, definitely, who was a photographer of the time. There was G.F. Watts, who was an artist, and he was married to a much younger wife, the actress Ellen Terry. Then there was Cameron's husband, whose first name now has completely escaped me. Maybe he was a James as well. He's in there. And who else was there? Oh yes, very important. It was referenced here in the image, as you can see. The phrenologists, the Fowlers from America. And they were a husband and wife couple and their daughter, and they basically led the phrenologist movement in the English-speaking world. And they all come together on the Isle of Wight. We've got Julia Cameron desperately trying to get Tennyson to agree to sit for her photographs. She sends sends presents to people all the time, and they're usually presents that people don't want. And it is amusing the whole way through. And there was actually a lot of the funny quotes towards the end, and I don't want to give them to you because it would give away the ending, and I don't want to do that. For example, there's this one, because it is comic, and it's just beautifully written, very well written. She knows how to structure a sentence, this lady, Lynne Truss. I'm having to mentally say to myself, don't say Liz Truss, because that just wouldn't be very fair on the woman. So, for example, we've got here, a railway had been mooted to bring more people to Freshwater, and Tennyson opposed it with every inch of his body. A visitor once averred in his hearing that a railway link would be dandy, but Tennyson dismissed this as the opinion of an ignoramus. That man clearly has no idea on how one thing leads to another, he declared. It was Charles Darwin. Another one. So Dodgson has been making friends with all the young girls on the island. And there's one Daisy who's 8 years old with a shrimp net. And he'd written a poem about loving, his love is with a love with a D. And so she's fallen in love, aged 8, with Dodgson, and has decided that she's going to elope with him. Anyway, so the night has come when she's waiting, stuffed into a hedgerow, and it's pouring with rain. And these are her little thoughts that are going through her head at this point. For the first time since she met him, she asked herself whether Mr. Dodgson was really the sunny personality she had first imagined. Did she honestly want to spend the rest of her life with him, setting up home in a bathing machine and living on what she could catch in a shrimp net? She pulled a face, stood up, brushed her frock. She was only 8, she told herself. As Jessie Fowler had pointed out this afternoon, a girl of 8 needn't say yes to the first man who says he loves his love with a D. Panic about spinsterhood when you are 10 and a half, said the worldly Jessie, but really, not before then. I love it because Jessie Fowler, who's the phrenologist's daughter, and she is when they do their shows, she's labelled the infant phrenologist. She's very educated and sort of, but she doesn't have a full understanding, clearly, because of her age, of what these things mean. She understands that they happen, but she doesn't necessarily understand. So it's just funny. It's amusing all the way through. And you get very few books that are amusing all the way through when they are being sold as a comic novel of subtle distinction. They don't often meet up to their publicity, but this one does. So I would highly recommend this one. I'll give this a 4.5 for all of the ideas with capital letters that occur in here. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, my fourth historical novel is a do not finish. And I've only got to page 122 out of, how many painful pages are these? 578. I have neither the time nor the inclination, nor, quite frankly, the strength to go through that. It is Victoria Hislop's The Return. This might make me very unpopular. Quite frankly, I don't care. It's so badly written. It's so badly written. I can't tell you. All I started scribbling in it, and then I remembered, actually, this is a book I borrowed. So, sorry, Juliana, when this goes back, there are some scribbles in here. I was losing the will to live. You can only be grateful that I did severely sprain my left wrist, which is the book hand that I hold a book in, because then I hold the book in the left hand and I can write notes and drink tea or wine with my right whilst reading. Obviously, I'm one-handed now, which meant that some of my vitriol didn't make it onto the page. But honestly, I can't it's a shame, because this book is about looking back at the Spanish Civil War. Now, as I live in Spain, this is quite an important, well, it's not quite, it's a very important part of history that is still not spoken about. They had when they signed the Constitution in 1976, they had this whole pact of, we forget, we don't drag it all up, we don't mull it all over, we start, clean slate, let's go forward. Luckily, in the 2000s, some bright spark went, actually, that's not a very good idea, is it? Because you can't ignore history. You have to face what's happened and move forward. Now, it's based in Granada, which is a very beautiful city. Of course, it has the Alhambra looking down at it. You've got the cathedral that's you've got tucked away. Yeah, I mean, of all the cities in Andalusia, that has got to be the most hidden cathedral. You've got all the narrow streets, especially near Albacin, which is the Moorish bit, which is sort of on the opposite side of the valley to the Alhambra. It's a very beautiful place that could be seriously evoked in this book, along with the history. Now, I haven't got anywhere near the historical part of this because I just can't read anymore. I cannot read it anymore. There's one, not only this, as I say, I'm only 122 pages into it and I'm going no further. This girl, it starts in the current time, as it were, so in 2000, whatever this was, 8, 9, and two of their best friends have gone to Granada. They're going to dance classes there. They go out dancing at night. Sonia, who's got a bad marriage, it's always a way, is kind of just like Mills and Boone with a little bit of extra in it. Anyway. She goes out to a coffee shop. She goes there 3 times at the beginning in these first 122 pages. The first time she goes there, she sits outside, she gets served. The chap tells her to go and visit Lorca's house, off she trots, blah, blah, blah. She goes back there the next day. She goes inside, because I think it was raining, something like that. She goes inside and sits there for 5 minutes without being served because it turns out he was on the telephone. Apparently, she must have sat there in the pitch dark or with her eyes shut for 5 minutes. Because the third time she goes there, she suddenly discovers that there are pictures on the wall. I mean, really. So, on page 102, so even he was finding it difficult to operate in the gloom, and he crossed the room to switch on the lights. The place was transformed by the sudden illumination. Really. It was much larger than Sonia had realised. A big square room with perhaps 30 round tables, blah, blah, blah. But what caught Sonia's eye were the walls. Every square inch of them was covered. So when she sat there, the second time she visited this cafe, she hadn't noticed all it. Stupid. And I just think, really, if you're gonna make a really basic error like that in the lead-up story to it, I dread to think what you're going to do with the actual history. I'm scared, really. Well, this is an example of how clumsy the line is. Of another line. The owner of her favourite cafe, El Barril, as she had now noticed it was called, knew that few of his customers would be wanting to sit outside when the temperatures had plummeted. I mean, how clumsy is it? It's just so bad. And the other one, the cafe owner stood next to her, almost poised to answer a question. But almost poised to answer a question? What's that? What's that? Yeah. So, she is boof. She's history. I just can't believe... I must be missing something. Because there's all of this. Hislop deserves a medal for opening a breach into the holiday beach bag. Independence. Well, beach read maybe it is, but... maybe the breach was that it should fall out of the hole in the bag and you lose it forever. Awful. Can't go forward. Sorry, that's a really aggressive review, isn't it? But I cannot find anything good to say about it 122 pages in, and I'm not going to put myself through the agony of another 450 pages of bad writing. I had also The Island, which was her first book, which sold millions of copies, or at least 1 million copy. I'm not even going to bother, because if that's her improved version, second novel, you should be better than your first. Dread to think. Sorry. Rant over. Nice bit of Countess Grey tea. My final read was The Cuckoo in the Nest, Evening Wars scoop. This is also amusing. It's a satirical look at journalism. Now, it needs a warning. It has racist language in it. This is a book of its time. It was written in 1938, I think, or thereabouts. 1938. The N-word is used, and various other versions thereof. But, as I have said before in previous ones, either you can deal with the fact that a book was written in this time when it didn't matter about the language that was used and people didn't care so much about other races, or so you either can or you cannot read that kind of a book. If you can't, do not pick this up and get upset by it. That's my advice. I can get past these things because I grew up with that, you know, in the 1970s. These words were being used all the time when I was a child. It's just how it was. I'm not saying it was right, I'm just saying that's how it was. So I can read these books without being majorly shocked and offended. But that's just a warning for those of you who maybe can't. Anyway, it's a satirical look at journalism, and the wrong boot Mr. Boot ends up going out to the Republic of Ishmaelia to report on a coup that isn't actually happening. And it just goes on about how all of these things are basically made up by journalists, but then the journalists themselves get upset by the fact that they are not treated with the respect that they used to get. Well, there's a thing, hey? And the cables that come from the head office back in London about what they should be doing are really quite blunt and funny. They're like, make it up, don't worry about this, oh, do this. This was one of the cables that came. Cable fullier, oftener, promptlier stop. Your service badly beaten all round, lacking human interest, colour, drama, personality, humour, information, romance, vitality. Can't say that's not frank, can you? Said Corker. God rot 'em. So it's you kind of feel sorry for the journalists who've been sent out to this backwater country to report on something that isn't happening, and then at the same time you don't feel sorry for them because then they just make stuff up and send it back, so the whole world thinks that Ishmaelia is undergoing some sort of coup, civil war, etc., and nothing of the sort is happening. But it's just very, very amusing. And I think that, because there's somewhere in here as well, but I seem to have lost the little dibby for it. He says about, Corker talks about how they go round, and the gentlemen of the press used to be respected, so that when you knocked on the door of the bereaved, they didn't mind that you asked them all these questions and what have you. He said, but not now. I was thinking, well, crikey. Roll forward another 100 years, matey, and you'll find out what it's like now. But very amusing. But as I say, the warning is of its time, and if you will not read something with racist language, then don't read this. But if you can do it because it's amusing. Get past that bit to look at what he was really writing about, which is journalists. Lord Cooper of Daily Beast, and you know what he thought of Fleet Street in the 1930s. So they were my 5 books for May. 4 good ones, 1 abysmal. I'm not going to go into that again, but I really, it's not very often that I get that annoyed with the way something is written, but I will never ever pick up one of her books again. I'm just not going to, life's too short. So, on that note, I will say goodbye. I hope that you're having good reading, that you're finding lots to enjoy, and that you enjoyed this video. If you would like to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. That would be much appreciated. And of course, share with your friends so that they too can come and hear me waffle on about what it is I do and do not like about books I've read. And I will see you very soon. I'm going to, my next little excursion is going to be not so very far. I'm going into Malaga City, which is that away along the coast, and I will be taking you on a literary guide around the city, because even though Malaga is considered to be the home of Picasso, which of course it was the birthplace of Picasso, and home to the rather lovely Antonio Banderas, actor, it's also got a lot of literary connections, some of which you may find surprising. So that will be the next one, and I hope to see you then. Cheers, bye!